In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie.
Now, you play piano as well?
Well, no, I'm a complete fraud when it comes to the piano. I would say, look, I can play, or I could play, the Moonlight Sonata and the Appassionata and one other Beethoven sonata. But the reason I can play them, and I really can't, because people who can play them are great, and I'm not great. I'm
Don't say fraud, because I told you earlier before we started taping that I had Eric Weinstein on, and he definitely told me, he convinced me that I am not a fraud of a podcaster. I am an imposter, which means I have the will to do it, and someday I have the sort of chance that I'll get better at it and eventually achieve what I'm going after. So
yeah, well, that's a really important distinction that you're making there, because I do write about that in both books, in 12 Rules for Life and Beyond Order. Nietzsche said at one point, the German philosopher, that every great man is an actor of his own ideal. And there's something in that about greatness in general. So imagine you do have an ambition. And so an ambition is who you could be calling to you, let's say. And you start to put that ambition into practice by doing this thing that you want to get good at. To begin with, you are an imposter. And Weinstein emphasizes that rather than a fraud. You're an imposter because you're not good enough at it to be doing it. But how in the world are you going to be good enough at it unless you stumble around in the dark to begin with? and that, now it might be fraudulent at that point for you to pass yourself off as greater than you are, but you do have to adopt a new identity and in some sense try that on and pretend to begin with before you actually become that thing. But I don't think that's what I'm doing with my piano. No, I've played these Beethoven sonatas for 30 years. I don't think I can play them at all now because I haven't really played the piano for about 2 years. Unfortunately, it's too loud. My hearing is too sensitive to really be able to tolerate it. I couldn't even listen to music for a long time, which was just a terrible loss. Man, it sucked. It was it was too loud and hurt, but also the depth disappeared. I couldn't get into it in that lovely way that sort of puts you into a trance. One of the things I really love to do is drive with loud music on, and I can put myself in a kind of, well, I hope it's a safe trance and that I'm not posing a danger to anybody on the highway, but I can look at the entire landscape in a sort of non-focused way and listen to the music, and it just transports me. I love that. I can do that for hours, but I haven't been able to. Anyways, with these Beethoven sonatas, I could eke them out on the piano, and Appassionata particularly is quite complex, but I can virtually play nothing else. I can do some improvisation. I know some chord structures, and I can produce relatively complex improvisations, but fundamentally, I'm like an idiot savant on the piano. I've got a couple of tricks, but other than that, man, I'm not there.
It's the one instrument I wish I would have learned. I never did. I bought a Fender Rhodes in Los Angeles. I bought it out of the recycler. It's a sort of a used magazine where everything's used. You buy it, and I had it in the apartment. And the only song I learned, because I said I would learn at least one song on piano, was "Best Friend," Queen.
Oh, that's another great 70s album, right? Night at the Opera, man. That's
Night at the Opera, Day at the Races. Oh my God. Yeah. But my son ended up playing piano, and he's quite natural and good at it. And the thing that's a little bit frustrating is that he's really good at it, but shows no interest in like pursuing it. Like he's like, yeah, well, I got it now. I did it. Now I'm moving on. And that's okay, because I want him to, what you say a lot is I want him to find purpose, meaning, something that speaks to him, and go for it. Because that's what I did with music. At a young age, I knew that it was music that I wanted to do. I didn't really have a backup plan to say. I kind of thought about other options, but music was always at the forefront. And I'm wondering, was it the same for you? Or, did you, obviously, you might not have thought of being a clinical psychologist at such a young age, but there had to have been an age where you said, you know what, I do want to pursue this. Observe.
Well, I took piano lessons when I was a kid, and I was trained in a classical way. And I wasn't really very interested in that classical music. I was much more interested in the kind of music that we're discussing. That was really what compelled me. So that took some of my interest out of it. The issue with your son is a complicated one, because with some skills, and musical skills are certainly in that category, it may be that you have to put in a kind of painful apprenticeship before you actually get swept along on your own interest and compulsion, because it's not that much fun to learn an instrument, although it's very fun to play one. It's also not that much fun to learn to read, because you have to struggle to identify the letters and then to put them together in words. And it isn't until you can kind of glance at whole phrases without having to undergo that painful conscious processing that the intrinsic interest kicks in. And so when you're thinking about your son, I don't want to give unwarranted advice here, but I really am in favor of let your interest take you where it takes you. But there is this element of discipline that's also necessary for complex skills. And so with children, it's complicated because you want them. It's such a gift to have musical skill once you're an adult. And you have to ask, well, how much is it worth torturing your children to get them to develop that? And the answer is probably quite a bit, because it's such a gift. I mean, my son and my daughter has musical interest as well. It was harder for her because she was really ill for most of her childhood, so she couldn't pursue it to the same degree that he did. But, it makes up probably about a quarter to a third of his life in terms of what brings him along and compels him forward. And he gets to perform, and he's good. He's a good guitar player, and he's credible on the piano as well. Much better at it than me, with much, much, much less practice on the piano per se. And so you think with your kids, well, how much do you crack the whip? We put Julian in piano lessons when he was young, about 4, and it was a struggle because he was a strong-willed kid and he didn't necessarily want to sit there for half an hour. But it was easier for him for singing. That was more compelling for him, and that's where he got most of his musical education. And that's been great. It's a great gift to the family. It's wonderful to be able to go over to his house and to have him play, and for all of us to sing together. Great.
I think he actually sang a really great rendition of So Lonely at your graduation.
At his grade 8 grad. Yeah, you saw that, did you?
That's on. Oh, I do my research, man. If I am going to interview Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, I'm going to do my research and go down that rabbit hole. And it's a great version. It's somewhere on the internet. It's in the ethers there, but you can find it. You can find it. It's
unbearably cute as far as I'm concerned. And one of the things I loved about watching him was he was so self-possessed as a performer. He just got right into the music, and he keeps the beat really carefully, and he's sunk right into it. It makes him, it's hard for me to judge, of course, because I'm his father, and you just can't overcome a bias like that. But
how far do you push, Jordan? Because this is what interests me, because I have never pushed my daughter to, I have a son and a daughter, and my daughter, I've never pushed her musically, but her voice is just one of those natural, really good sounding voices. And she turns me on to all these bands. She's the one that turns me on to Cave Town, Cage the Elephant, Blackpool, all these indie bands that come from a little bit from my generation. But she's doing that on her own volition. But how far do you push kids? I mean, before it becomes Tiger Woods' father? And is Tiger Woods' father making Tiger as great as he is? Is that the right thing to do? Or is it, where's that line?
God, wouldn't it be lovely if we could figure that out? I mean, I would say for every child that's over encouraged, there's 1,000 that are under encouraged. And you obviously don't want to push so hard that your relationship is disrupted. And so to some degree, you have to calibrate your interactions with each child. And you do that even with discipline. Some children you can just shake your finger at when they're misbehaving, and that'll stop them. And other kids are really stubborn and put up a really remarkable fight. And so there's not even a universal prescription for disciplinary measures. And there's wide cultural variation in the answer to that question as well. I mean, first generation Asian immigrants have disproportionately successful children. And it looks like the reason for that is that they push and they instill in their children conscientiousness. And that gives them what's equivalent to about a 15-point IQ advantage. That disappears by about the third generation, by the way. So I think we probably under-push as a culture. That's my sense. But it's very, very difficult to tell. And I think partly we under-push because, well, there's first this misapprehension that if you discipline your children, you'll destroy their creativity. And that's just not true. That's based on a misapprehension of creativity. And I also think often it's an excuse for not engaging as well. You know, I don't want to push my child too hard. It's like, well, yeah, really, you just don't want to take the time. My father spent an awful lot of time with me when I was a kid, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, especially learning to read. And it was a tremendous gift to me. And I'm thrilled that he did it. And he had extremely high standards, but I don't think he pushed me, at least with reading. What he did was encourage me. And that's a skill and a gift to manage that with your children, isn't it? To encourage them.
I'm Ryan Roxie, and I've taken all my years of experience of playing guitar, and I want to pass the torch of rock and roll on to you. Check out the System 12 Guitar Method.